long have you been aware? Were you aware of the Lone Star Ranch even before you became, involved with the family?
Yeah, when I was 13, I was in the 4-H, and my uncle Chug Pribbeno brought me up here, and I bought a 4-H calf. About 13, so I knew who Bud was, and then I was associated with him in the wheat growers for several years, and then represented the wheat growers in Africa in 1961, trying to sell wheat products. And he insisted I wear a cowboy hat and bought the hat for me.
Huh.
Took me to Ogallala and bought a Resistol hat before I was ever part of the family.
And now you were no stranger to ranching, right? You tell us about your own operations, your own family.
Well, I was pretty much a stranger to ranching, per se. We were farmers, dirt farmers. My folks came at about the turn of the century out to western Nebraska. But my great-great-grandfather was known as Pikes Peak Charlie Pribbeno. And he ran an ox team from Independence, Missouri and Falls City, Nebraska, once a year to Pikes Peak, and took ground corn out and brought back Indian robes. And he came to Nebraska the day after Lincoln was shot, 1863 or 4. So Pribbenos have been around. He made enough money on his over the truck, big truck over the trails to Pikes Peak. He bought 800 acres in Nebraska, and that went to another uncle of mine. Then my grandfather had a grocery store and dry goods and implements in Preston. When he made money, he bought land in western Nebraska, and when his kids got old enough, he shipped them out, and they lived on those various places. But they did have cattle. My dad decided he didn't want to milk and handle cattle, he just wanted to farm. So he put together a nice size operation and worked hard putting it together. And when I married Babs, we decided for continuity's sake, we would incorporate, and I'd throw my land in and make it all one big deal.
So that's when the name
Stinger Pribbeno.
Limited.
Right. I don't know why we chose limited. We both felt like maybe we were limited than the other guy.
So this was primarily a ranching operation. Your other operations were the farm.
Right. But the farming operation here was just as large as my land, just about.
So you actually ran it for a while.
Oh yeah. I farmed out there, and then when they got behind, I'd come up here with the equipment and farm.
But to be honest now, was that your favorite occupation in the whole world?
I did that for 20 years, and my kids sent them through college. Jeff got out of university and had a lot of new ideas, and I was tired of doing things by myself, and I knew Jeff needed a free hand. So I agreed to just turn everything over to him, and I bought the bank in Enders. I climbed out of the tractor seat and into the bank. From one man's problems to everybody's problems.
Does that make you too sympathetic, you think, to the ranchers and the farmers, having had that background and then becoming a banker, or do you think that it's?
I think it adds to, gives me more perspective and scope, and I can look at a financial statement and tell whether they're doing things right, management-wise. Yeah, it's been a great advantage.
I have a question. A lot of people came out here and homesteaded apparently around the same time as Sherman McCoy came. Was his story typical, where it was a lot of hard work and hard times, but it ultimately was a grand success, and everybody was that the exception or the rule?
I think that's the ones who came out and stayed. There were years when weeds wouldn't even grow in the bar ditches, and people that were used to a humid area farming took off back to Iowa or Illinois. But the ones that stayed and fought it through eventually paid their dues and won out.
And their families are
still here in some way.
So you think old-fashioned values just, or the other end of it, the get-rich-quick people that want to get easy money overnight. They didn't.
They get eliminated by various cycles. Bad economy, just they lack the will to stay here. And there's a pioneer spirit and survival. It all boils down to survival. What does it take to survive? Sometimes you just tighten your belt. You don't spend any money. You pay your dues.
Has there been a theme, you think, to this particular ranch, the Lone Star Ranch?
I think
the years,
so.
It goes from Sherman McCoy through Bud and you and Jeff.
I'm sure. I know Sherman McCoy was tight-fisted, conservative. He went off on the markets a time or two and just about lost things, but he was a hard-working man. And when Bud and I formed the corporation, we decided on a motto. If I can remember, it was wisely, slowly. Run, you stumble. So we haven't been quick to change. We have land here where we could put 10 or 15 center pivots, but it's not the best use of this particular land, we feel. Now, if corn becomes a necessity and prices go to $8 a bushel, it might be wise to look at that, but it's good pasture, meant for cattle.
So you think all in all the Homestead Act was a pretty good deal?
It brought people out. Yeah, I think we'd still have probably the original 13 colonies if we hadn't found something to bring people out into this area. Once you get out here and spend most of your life, you can't wait to get back. We have some that transplant, but never want to come back, but it's always good to come home. And my kids are glad to come home. Once a year, they show up here at branding time, and we hardly take any kind of an excuse, maybe a pregnancy, and they always show up.
Any of them get skittish at some of the jobs they have to do or sing?
Well, they start out that way. It has to be done. They realize it. As they grow older, they mature.
Is it hard for you I know you probably managed a lot of these roundups, but is it hard for you to let go and let Jeff run?
Not at all. That's the greatest pleasure I have now is we went to a subchapter S and made sure that the kids paid their own way through college. And we started turning over the ranch and our assets early. Babs and I have very little. Bud and Mary turned theirs over early. And it's fun to just kind of sit back and see what the next generation's going to do instead of holding it to yourself. And once you're in the grave, you don't know what's going to happen.
You've got, speaking of the next generation, you got a lot of them around you.
We sure do.
Come back.
It's
that
great.
A good feeling?
Oh, wonderful.
Do you think that you're bringing them in helps keep them
no
around?
doubt about it. Yeah, my daughter from Colorado Springs and her dentist husband bring Alex, and Mike works. He's president of the bank, and their 3 kids take part. He's in horse club. And Dolly's working in a bank in Colorado Springs. She comes back, does her job. Jeff's here on the ranch.
How about us
Sue,
cousins?
And then cousins galore. We're always glad to see them.
We all feel part of it,
Sure. Well, most of you
family,
worked a summer or 2 here.
I never
did something, but
Rick was telling me.
Sure.
Tell me what it was like growing up on the ranch. You grew up, in Imperial, I guess.
Right. We moved to town when I was 2, I guess. I can remember spending a lot of time out here with Mary and Bump Up, though, my grandparents. We would ride horses out here in this area and play on the haystacks and on the farm equipment. Did a lot of playing house in the chicken coop, which is long gone because Bump Up didn't like chickens. They were too messy. And in the barn, which is about to be gone.
People think, a lot of people would think that's the idyllic childhood to grow up and have that available. Is that true? Are you happy that you had that?
Well, it was fun, but I was I was disappointed that there wasn't a swimming pool out here and there were no other children to play with usually. Sometimes we had people who worked for us who had kids our age. We'd do things with them, but I was always glad to get back to town and be busy with my friends.
I noticed you were doing some chores here. Did you have work to do on the ranch?
Not really. We used to go around and check cattle with Bump Up though, in the pickup. Drive around with them and check windmills and so forth, which seemed like he had to do that every day. I don't know how Jeff handles it now. They have I don't know, it's delegated out somehow.
Yeah, you don't live near the ranch now. You live in Colorado Springs. Is that
Right.
difficult living away from the rest of the family? And
It's really hard. It's hard to be out of Nebraska too, because there are so many things that are so typically Nebraska when you're born here that we miss being in Colorado, and it feels strange to come and be the out-of-towners now. And now I might add, I'm delighted to come back to the ranch. All this wide open space that I thought was so boring when I was a child, now I think is wonderful. I could live out here very easily now.
Can you imagine your life or your family without the ranch? Has it been a key part of your life?
Major. Extremely.
Do you remember stories from your grandparents and others about Sherman McCoy and the whole history? Has that become a part of your...
I've learned quite a bit just recently about that because of the centennial. Evidently, he was very ambitious and smart and bought up a lot of land when the getting was good. You know, traded land for people who traded things for land with people that were having hard times, I guess, during the Depression. He was very smart, a good operator, which thankfully has run in the family because Jeff is doing a great job too.
And your granddad apparently was pretty good.
He was excellent also. I think that he thought Jeff might have some radical ideas because, well, the age difference. Bump Up was very conservative, you know. They used to drive tractors that were completely obsolete. Until they no longer could get parts to keep them running, then they'd finally get rid of them. So.
Now, Bump Up was Bud Stanger, and his real name was A.O. Stanger.
Right.
And why did you name your little boy, after him?
Well, my grandfather disliked his own name, Alfred Oscar, so intensely that we called him Bump Up, the grandchildren called him Bump Up, and all his friends called him Bud. And he really did not want anybody to name their children after him. And Alfred was a bit extreme, so I went with Alexander Oscar, and I get a chuckle out of it all the time. It's just fun to call him A.O. and Alex Oscar, and besides, my grandfather was one of the most important people in my life. So I'm glad I could do that. I don't know how my son feels about it.
So you're not going to call him Bud?
No.